This is Hello World in PHP. In this screencast, we're going to do some really basic stuff with PHP to do the simplest possible thing you can possibly do with PHP. There will barely be any actual programming in this. We're just going to set a value to a variable and then output it to the browser. So you'll get experience with the echo command that will give you the ability to send stuff to the browser in PHP, but we'll also fool around a little bit with concepts called concatenation and string interpolation, which are just fancy ways of saying putting text together so that you can assemble it and send it out to the browser. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so I have a text editor in front of me now, and I'll zoom in on this. In the text editor, I'm going to start writing some PHP code. I'm going to do this first, just outputting plain text to the browser, and then we'll worry about making this a valid HTML page. But to start creating PHP code, I start by typing left angle bracket question mark and then PHP. And because I always like to close brackets when I open them, or close tags when I open them, just to make sure that they're matched up properly, I create the PHP close tag at the same time, which is a question mark and a right angle bracket. And you can see that my text editor will actually highlight the area that is comprised of the PHP block. It's a little subtle, but you can see that it's a little bit darker. This is one of the many reasons why I really like TextMate, the editor that I use on the Mac. Other editors do similar things, but one key thing I'll remind you of is that you do not want to use a editor like Microsoft Word or anything else like that. When you're writing PHP code, you need to use a text editor. So the course has a list of text editors that will work, and we have a few choices that we like that will work no matter what operating system you're working on or anything like that. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do in this Hello World code is I'm going to set the value of a variable called x to some number, and I just randomly chose 6. The idea here is that I could make this 7 or 8 or 9 or something else, or I could make it the result of some kind of calculation. The point is that anything that goes on in the PHP code block is being generated dynamically, right? It's going to be interpreted on your server, and then if you output it to the browser, the result of the calculation can be sent out to the browser. But if I go to the browser now, and you can see that I am working on my localhost machine, I have a web server set up on my machine. You may or may not be doing this for the course. Probably the easiest way for you to do this and to follow along is to put this file on the student server on your shell account on the student server. But the key thing here to understand is that just setting the value of a variable doesn't do anything, right? I can refresh this page. It's doing the operation, but it's not sending it to the browser. I have to do something extra to get the data out to the browser. So what I do here, going back to my code, is to use one of two statements in PHP. They both work identically, echo and print. I use echo because it's one less character to type, and I'm really lazy. Now I can just go x, and this will send x to the browser if I refresh. And you can see there's a teeny tiny little 7 there. So it correctly did what I expected it to. But there's still a couple problems with this. One is that the number 7 is teeny tiny. The other problem is that what I have here is actually not a valid HTML page. There's no document type definition. PHP doesn't add that stuff for you. It only does what you tell it to. And in this case, all you told it to do was to send the value of x to the browser. So it renders it as text, which browsers can do. But for the scripts that you create in this course, they should be valid HTML. So to make valid HTML, I'm going to start by creating a doc type, and that red flash that you just saw was just error highlighting that TextMate was doing. No need to be alarmed about that. It goes away once you create a valid document type definition. This is the HTML5 document type definition, which you're free to use in this course. It's probably has the benefit of being the easiest one that you have access to, so it probably makes sense to use. I'm going to create a valid HTML head and a title for this, and I'm going to call this PHP Hello World, very simple. And then I'm going to put my PHP code will go in the body. of my document, right? So now I do have a valid HTML page, and you can resave this and refresh it in the browser to see that this is the case. The display of the page doesn't change, but the output changed in a big way. Instead of just outputting, and this is the source as rendered by the browser, it's exactly the same, with the exception of the PHP code, of course, doesn't get sent to the browser, and that's important. PHP code doesn't get sent to the browser, it gets interpreted on the server, and then the output of that code, if any, gets sent to the browser. So the variable assignment doesn't get sent to the browser, the echo statement doesn't get sent to the browser, just the output of that echo statement ends up getting sent to the browser. Okay? Now that we have actual HTML, we can do all kinds of fun stuff. Like we can change the formatting of this number so that we can actually see what's going on. So I'm going to wrap this whole thing in a div. So I'll create the div tag first, open and close, and then I will add an inline style. And I'll say font size is, let's say 3.5, make it nice and big. I'm going to save this again, go back to the browser and refresh, and it didn't work. Oh, whoops. Forgot to use the measurement. It's good that I make mistakes on screencasts, isn't it? Helps you realize that I'm human and helps you with your own mistakes, right? I'm just rationalizing. Anyway, let's go back here and do one more thing with this real quick. I mentioned that we want to also join strings together as well too. And so what I want to have happen in this code is to say the number is 7, not just 7. So I'll make this a little bit more friendly. So I'm going to do it like this. I'll do it two ways actually. Let's use concatenation first. So you can see what I did here is I'm joining a string that literally reads the number is, and I'm using the concatenation operator. It might be a little hard to see, but it's a period, a single period, and then that joins it to the value of x. So my expectation is that when this gets outputted to the browser, it will be a sentence that says the number is 7, right? I put in a mistake in here, and I'll show you in a second. I'll refresh this, and you can see it still didn't work. Oh, I forgot to save it. I'm making mistakes left and right here today, aren't I? Okay, reloading, and the number is 7. Now, I made a mistake intentionally. I promise you it was intentional. I say is and then 7, and there's no space in between is and 7. You can actually see this in the source. It doesn't look right. So you have to remember when you're concatenating to stick a space in there if it's appropriate to have a space in between two things that you're concatenating, right? I go back and refresh this, and you should be able to see that the number is 7, and if I wanted to put punctuation or whatever in there, I could do that too. One more thing about this is that this is not the only way of joining strings together. In PHP, you have this method, which is called concatenation or joining, but you also have another related concept called string interpolation or inserting, right? When you take a string variable or any variable, you can put it inside of a string if the string is delimited by double quotes, okay? So this, you may find it to be a slightly tidier way, a little bit easier to read of joining strings together, and I'm going to show you an example of that right here. You can see I'm not using the concatenation operator, the period, anymore. I took that out and I changed it so that I'm using interpolation rather than concatenation. The number is, and this variable will be interpreted by virtue of the fact that I'm using double quotes to delimit my string. Go back to the browser and refresh, and you can see that it's the same thing as before. In other words, the output of my interpolation, which I have here, is exactly the same as my previous concatenation. There's really two reasons to use interpolation like I have here rather than concatenation. One is that if you have a lot of variables and a lot of strings to be joined, you may find it to be easier to use interpolation just in terms of coding. But also interpolation is faster. So if you have a lot to do, like a big loop that does it 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, then you will almost always find that the execution of your code goes a little bit faster when you use interpolation. But one pitfall you have to watch out for is you have to remember that to use interpolation, you have to use double quotes. And you can see I've changed my string so that it's delimited now by single quotes. Here's what happens. That's not what you want, right? You didn't want $x, you wanted the value of $x, right? The value that's being contained in that variable. And that kind of transformation only happens when the string is delimited by double quotes. So that's it.